My former best friend went insane after I gave her a much-needed brutal reality check. She tried to ruin my wedding and get me fired, so I exposed her in a way that ruined her whole life. Growing up, my best friend was way richer than I was, but I actually liked it that way. When Rachel got designer clothing for Christmas and flaunted it in my face, whilst my only gift was my mother's hand-me-downs, I was happy for her. I was also happy for her at our elementary school graduation. Her parents took her to Disneyland, where she sent me photos joking that I probably wish I was her. All my parents could afford for mine was frozen pizza. When she found out, she laughed at me and called me poor. And I laughed alongside her, because I knew that in the long run, how she treated me right now because I was poor would only benefit me. And I was right. I graduated high school with a full academic scholarship because I realized studying was my only way out. Rachel, on the other hand, dropped out in sophomore year because she thought she could coast through life on family money. We actually stopped talking right around this time. She said maturing has made her realize she's too good to be friends with peasants like me, and as sad as I was, I matched her energy. I still texted her once or twice a year, wishing her Merry Christmas or a Happy Birthday though. I knew she had no friends, and that a simple text probably meant a lot to her. But other than that, we didn't talk. All I knew was that she was fully reliant on her parents and was trying to make it as an influencer. Honestly, I thought I'd never see her again. Until one day when I was 28. I had just graduated med school, bought a small apartment, and recently gotten engaged. That's when I got the random urge to contact her. I think I just wanted her to see me and be proud of me. I thought she would be. But instead, I got the biggest slap to the face of my life. I showed up to the cafe with an invitation to a ball me and my fiancé were going to, and a cheap but very pretty necklace for her. I actually wanted to reconnect, but then I saw her, and I almost gasped. She was trying to hide how old she looked with a pound of makeup, and was wearing a designer outfit with the tag still on. To my surprise, she actually hugged me and smiled. I hugged her back, but kept my guard up. We exchanged pleasantries, but as soon as the waiter took our orders, her mask fell apart. She snapped her fingers at him like he was a dog. We began catching up, and I quickly found out she just got cut off by her friend group over a joke she made. She refused to say what the joke was, though. Either way, I saw this as my chance to invite her to the ball. Rachel, I said, Paul and I are going to the ball. Do you want to come? Oh, I'm a doctor going to a ball with a man who's probably cheating. She cut me off. I just stared at her and saw the resentment in her eyes. It had been 12 years. No way was she still like this. I tried to talk again, but when I did, she did the same thing, except now she threw insults, calling me lab rat and my fiancé, who she's never met, a lowlife. I was taken aback, and for the first time in my life, I fully saw just how pathetic and insane Rachel was. I gave up on the invitation and took out the necklace and gave it to her, but instead of thanking me or even trying it on, she took it too far. Wow, this looks like something your hobo parents found in my dad's dumpster and gave to you as a present. My jaw dropped. My body filled with so much rage, I felt my face turning red. I looked at her dead in the eye, my hands twitching with anger. In response, she looked up, except instead of making eye contact, her head started darting around and avoiding me, almost as if she was terrified of what I was about to do. It took every part of me not to stand up and use my 3 years of kickboxing on her. Instead, I did something even better. I simply kept staring at her and began taunting her deepest insecurities. Hey Rachel, I said, my voice low. How old were you when your dad kicked you out? She went red. Remember how it felt when you realized you were nothing without him? She started to tear up. I know you, Rachel. You wake up every morning in tears, wishing your dad would keep giving you money, wishing every man you dated didn't leave, wishing you didn't look so old, wishing you aren't going to die alone in a crappy condo you rent in a part of town you're too scared to walk outside in. She was fully crying by this point, her mascara streaming, but I didn't care. I even took out the ball invite and slid it across the table, telling her this was her final chance. With that, I walked out. Later that same night, I told Mark about the disaster coffee meeting. He listened sympathetically, but warned me about letting toxic people back into my life. Some relationships aren't worth salvaging, he said. I nodded, thinking that was the end of it. Rachel probably wouldn't contact me again after what I'd said. 2 days later, my phone pinged with a message from Rachel. It was a lengthy apology for her behavior at the cafe. She claimed she'd been going through a tough time and had taken it out on me unfairly. The message ended with her accepting my invitation to the charity ball. I showed Mark the message, still unsure. What do you think? I asked. He frowned at my phone. People don't change overnight, but it's your call. After thinking about it, I decided to give Rachel one last chance. I responded that we could start fresh, but I needed her to respect boundaries. No more insulting comments about my life or my family. She agreed immediately. The night of the charity ball arrived. I was nervous about seeing Rachel again, but also hopeful that maybe she was genuinely sorry. Mark and I arrived early since I was on the organizing committee. The venue looked stunning. The Historical Art Museum downtown had been transformed with elegant lighting and floral arrangements. When Rachel walked in an hour later, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked absolutely gorgeous in a deep blue gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But more importantly, her demeanor was completely different. She was smiling warmly, thanking the staff, and behaving like a normal, polite human being. Your dress is beautiful, she said, approaching us. And this must be Mark. I've heard so much about you. Mark gave me a surprised look, but shook her hand politely. Throughout dinner, Rachel was pleasant company, asking thoughtful questions about Mark's work and complimenting my engagement ring. I started to think maybe she really had reflected on her behavior and wanted to change. Then I went to the restroom and overheard something that made my blood run cold. Rachel was talking to one of the hospital board members, a woman I worked with closely. Yes, I've known her since childhood, Rachel was saying. I actually mentored her through medical school. She was struggling with some of the advanced concepts, but I've always had a knack for medicine. I'm a surgeon at Memorial now. I stood frozen by the sinks. Rachel wasn't a doctor. She had never even finished high school as far as I knew. She was outright lying about me and herself to my colleagues. I waited until the board member left, then confronted Rachel. What are you doing? You're not a doctor, and you certainly never mentored me. Rachel's face fell for a second before she recovered. I was just trying to fit in with your fancy doctor friends. They all seemed so impressed by credentials. By lying about me? About yourself? These are my colleagues, Rachel. My reputation matters here. She started crying, which immediately made me feel like the bad guy, even though she was clearly in the wrong. I just wanted to feel important for once, she sobbed. Everyone here is so accomplished, and I'm not. Against my better judgment, I softened. Let's just get some air, I suggested, not wanting to make a scene. I'll grab us some drinks and meet you on the terrace. I went to the bar to get us some water, needing a minute to process what had just happened. When I returned to find Rachel, I spotted her surrounded by a group of my university colleagues. They were looking at her phone and then glancing at me with strange expressions. As I approached, I caught a glimpse of what they were looking at. Photos of me, embarrassing childhood photos I didn't even know still existed. Rachel was in the middle of a story about how I had wet the bed at a sleepover sleepover when I was 12, something that had never actually happened. Rachel, I said sharply, can I talk to you for a minute? She followed me to a quiet corner, her expression all innocence. What's wrong? You know exactly what's wrong. Where did you even get those photos? Oh, I've had them forever, she said casually. Just some memories I saved. I thought your friends would enjoy seeing the real you. The real me? You're making up stories to humiliate me. Rachel leaned close, her voice dropping. You humiliated me at the cafe. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? Before I could respond, she stepped back and her demeanor completely changed. I'm so sorry about the photos, she said loudly, for the benefit of anyone who might be listening. I didn't realize they would upset you. Let me delete them right now. She made a show of deleting the photos from her phone, but something told me she had copies. My instincts were screaming that I'd made a terrible mistake inviting her here. The rest of the evening I tried to keep Rachel in my sight, but she kept drifting away to talk to different colleagues. I caught snippets of conversations, nothing overtly damaging, but subtle implications that we had been much closer friends than we were, with her always in the mentor position. I was getting a headache from the stress when disaster struck. Rachel and I were standing near the silent auction tables when she accidentally bumped into me, spilling her full glass of red wine down the front of my cream-colored dress. Oh my god, I'm so clumsy, she exclaimed, making a big show of trying to help while actually just spreading the stain further. The dress was ruined. It was specially made for the event, and I had been planning to speak later about the Children's Wing fundraising campaign. Now I looked like I'd been in an accident. Several of the hospital donors were watching with concern. I tried to laugh it off, but I could feel tears of frustration building. I need to go clean up, I mumbled, heading for the restroom. Mark followed me, his face tight with anger. That wasn't an accident, he said once we were alone. I was watching her. She timed it perfectly when that group of donors was looking. I nodded, dabbing at the hopeless stain. I know. We should leave, Mark suggested. You can email your speech to Dr. Patterson to read. I hated the idea of missing the networking opportunity with the chief of surgery, but my dress was beyond saving, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Rachel had more accidents planned if I stayed. As we left the event early, I glanced back to see Rachel watching us with a small smile. That's when I realized this was just the beginning. I had no idea what I had started by reconnecting with her, but I had a sinking feeling I was going to find out. The next morning, I woke up to multiple text messages from colleagues asking if I was okay. At first, I figured they were concerned about the wine incident, but when I read the messages, my stomach dropped. Apparently, Rachel had told several people that I had to leave the event because I'd had one too many drinks and couldn't handle my alcohol. I immediately called Dr. Patterson to explain what really happened, but I could tell from his tone that he wasn't entirely convinced. These things happen, he said diplomatically. Just make sure you're prepared for the board meeting next week. The implication was clear. My professional reputation had taken a hit. When I told Mark about it, he was furious. This is ridiculous, he said, pacing our kitchen. She's deliberately trying to sabotage you. I know, I replied, feeling sick to my stomach. But how do I prove it? It's her word against mine, and she's apparently very convincing. I tried calling Rachel to confront her, but she didn't answer. Instead, she texted back claiming she hadn't said anything about me drinking. She just mentioned I wasn't feeling well. According to her, my colleagues must have made assumptions or were lying to create drama. You should block her number, Mark suggested. Cut all contact. I nodded, but something held me back from blocking her immediately. If she was going to continue spreading lies about me, I wanted to know what she was saying. Instead, I decided to start documenting everything. I created a folder on my phone where I saved screenshots of all our text conversations and made notes about every interaction. Over the next week, I kept my head down at work, focused on my patients, and tried to repair any damage to my reputation through sheer professionalism. I thought maybe Rachel had moved on after having her fun at the ball. I was dead wrong. A week after the charity event, my department head called me into his office. Dr. Klein was normally warm and supportive, but today his expression was serious as he turned his computer monitor toward me. Can you explain this? He asked. On the screen was a social media post from an account called Medical Frauds, showing what appeared to be me at various medical conferences, clearly intoxicated in the photos, except I knew for a fact these images were doctored. In one, my head had been poorly photoshopped onto someone else's body. In another, a normal photo of me holding a water glass had been altered to make it look like I was disoriented. This is fake, I said immediately. I've never been drunk at a conference. These are doctored images. Dr. Klein sighed. I figured as much. The Photoshop job isn't even very good, but these posts have been sent to several board members, and we need to address it. I felt my face burning with humiliation as I explained about Rachel, my former friend who seemed determined to destroy my reputation. It was mortifying having to tell my boss about this personal drama, but I had no choice. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, Dr. Klein said when I finished. Do you think she'll escalate further? I honestly don't know, I admitted. I never expected any of this. He advised me to document everything and suggested I consult the hospital's legal team if things got worse. As I left his office, I felt a mixture of relief that he believed me and dread about what Rachel might do next. That evening, Mark and I agreed it was time to completely cut off Rachel. I blocked her on all platforms and asked mutual acquaintances to not share any information about me with her. We thought maybe without access to me, she'd lose interest and move on. For a couple of weeks, things seemed to quiet down. No more fake social media posts appeared, and the gossip at work gradually died down. I started to relax, focusing on our upcoming wedding plans instead. We had booked a beautiful venue for the fall, a historic mansion with gardens that would be filled with autumn colors. The deposit had been a stretch financially, but worth it for our dream location. Then one evening, I got a call from the venue. Dr. Thompson, this is Andrea from Bellevue Manor. I'm calling to confirm your change of date from October 15th to December 3rd, and to let you know we've processed the cancellation of your catering deposit as requested. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I didn't request any changes, I said, my voice shaking. Our wedding is still set for October 15th. There was an awkward pause. Well, I have the change request form here, signed by you 3 days ago. Your fiancé's mother came in to make the arrangements. My fiancé's mother lives in Colorado, I said flatly. She hasn't been to town in months. After a confusing back and forth, the truth emerged. Someone claiming to be me had made an appointment with the venue, somehow convinced them she was me, despite looking nothing like me, and made significant changes to our wedding arrangements. The venue had even refunded our catering deposit to a different credit card, meaning we'd lost thousands of dollars. I need to see the security footage, I insisted, and we need to restore all original arrangements immediately. The manager was apologetic but firm that they needed proper identification to make any changes. Mark and I drove there right away, IDs in hand, feeling sick with worry that our date might already be booked by someone else. Fortunately, our original date was still available. The manager was horrified when he realized what had happened and worked with us to restore everything, though we had to pay rush fees to reinstate our original catering order. When he showed us the security footage, my suspicions were confirmed. It was Rachel, with dyed hair and glasses, but unmistakably her. We're filing a police report, Mark said decisively as we left. This has gone beyond harassment to actual fraud. The police took our report but weren't particularly encouraging. Without Rachel admitting she had impersonated me, they said it would be difficult to prove it wasn't just a misunderstanding. They advised us to take civil action instead. 3 weeks before our wedding, the situation escalated dramatically. My bridesmaids started acting strangely, canceling dress fittings, making excuses about the bachelorette party. Finally, my maid of honor Jamie called me directly. I need to ask you something, she said, her voice uncharacteristically serious. Are you and Mark having problems? Because if you need to talk, I'm here for you. Confused, I asked what she meant. That's when she forwarded me an email she'd received from an anonymous account. It contained screenshots of text messages supposedly between Mark and another woman, along with a note saying, "Thought the bride should know." The texts were completely fabricated. They showed Mark telling this woman how unhappy he was with me and planning to meet her at a hotel. The messages didn't even sound like him, and the phone number shown wasn't his. But they were convincing enough to make my bridesmaids concerned. I spent hours on the phone, reassuring each of my confused friends that my relationship was solid and the messages were fake. Meanwhile, Mark was devastated that his character was being attacked. He'd always prided himself on his integrity, and the idea that people might think he was cheating was unbearable to him. "Who does this?" he asked that night, pacing our apartment. "Who puts this much effort into hurting someone else?" I had no good answer. The level of malice Rachel was showing went beyond anything I could understand. This wasn't just petty revenge anymore. This was a concentrated effort to destroy my life. My cousin Joseph worked in cybersecurity, and I reached out to him for help. He agreed to trace the anonymous emails to see if we could connect them definitively to Rachel. The emails originated from a public internet cafe about 3 blocks from Rachel's apartment, he reported back a few days later. Can't prove she sent them specifically, but it's a pretty big coincidence. We took this information to the police, but again, they said it wasn't enough evidence to pursue criminal charges. They suggested getting a restraining order instead, which required less burden of proof. While we were figuring out our legal options, Rachel escalated yet again. Someone called the hospital anonymously, claiming they had seen me stealing medication from the pharmacy for personal use. This triggered an automatic investigation that temporarily limited my access to certain areas of the hospital, including medication storage. I was beyond humiliated having to explain to hospital security that I was being targeted by a vindictive former friend. They reviewed the security footage from the times in question and quickly confirmed I had done nothing wrong, but the experience was incredibly stressful. For a few days, I had to have another doctor co-sign all my medication orders, which meant explaining the situation to colleagues I barely knew. The hospital investigation cleared me within a week, thanks to their excellent security systems that showed I had never accessed the pharmacy inappropriately. But the damage to my reputation lingered. I could feel colleagues watching me, wondering if there was truth to the accusations. Some patients requested different doctors. It was subtle, but devastating. Meanwhile, Rachel found a new angle of attack. Mark's mother, Linda, had never been my biggest fan. She'd always hoped her son would marry the daughter of their family friends, and while she was polite to me, there was always a certain coolness. Rachel somehow discovered this vulnerability. One day, Mark got a concerned call from his mother. "Is everything okay with you and Sarah?" she asked. "I've been hearing some concerning things." It turned out Rachel had joined Linda's yoga class under a fake name and spent weeks befriending her. Once she gained Linda's trust, Rachel began dropping subtle comments questioning my character and suggesting Mark wasn't happy but was too loyal to admit it. "She seemed so genuine," Linda told Mark when he confronted her about it. "She said she knew you from college and was just concerned." Mark was furious. "Mom, I've told you how happy I am. Why would you believe a stranger over me?" The situation came to a head when I happened to be driving past the yoga studio one day and saw Rachel walking out with Linda. I recognized her immediately despite her new hairstyle. Without thinking, I parked and confronted her in the parking lot. "What are you doing with my future mother-in-law?" I demanded. Rachel put on a confused expression. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just taking a yoga class." "Stop lying, Rachel. I know exactly what you're doing." She shrugged, looking annoyingly calm. "You seem really paranoid, Sarah. Maybe you should talk to someone about that." Before I could respond, Linda came out of the studio and looked between us in confusion. Rachel used the opportunity to slip away, leaving me to explain everything to Linda. Fortunately, when I showed Linda photos of Rachel and evidence of her harassment campaign, she believed me. She was horrified to realize she'd been manipulated and apologized for doubting me. It was a relief to clear the air, but exhausting to have to constantly defend myself. With our wedding just 2 weeks away, Mark and I thought we had finally contained Rachel's influence. We'd warned everyone in our lives about her, increased security for the wedding, and were being extra cautious about sharing any personal information. Then I received a certified letter from an attorney claiming I had committed malpractice on a patient named Tyler Benson, resulting in permanent nerve damage. The letter demanded a settlement of $200,000 to avoid a lawsuit. I had never treated anyone named Tyler Benson. A quick search revealed he was Rachel's cousin. Mark and I immediately contacted our own attorney, who advised us that while the claim was obviously fraudulent, we needed to respond officially. We postponed our honeymoon to Japan to deal with the legal threat, losing thousands on non-refundable bookings. Our attorney sent a strongly worded response pointing out that hospital records would show I had never treated this patient, and threatening counteraction for filing a frivolous claim. The opposing attorney dropped the case quickly, suggesting they hadn't actually verified the claim before sending the letter. But the stress was taking a serious toll. I had trouble sleeping, jumping at every notification on my phone. Mark installed additional security cameras at our apartment after we found our car keyed in the parking garage. We both lost weight from the constant anxiety. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I discovered that someone had created an entire website dedicated to exposing me as a dangerous doctor. The site featured fabricated patient testimonials claiming I had botched simple procedures, acted unprofessionally, or prescribed incorrect medications. Some of the stories were so detailed they seemed believable, especially since they mixed in actual details about my medical specialty. The site ranked highly in search results for my name. New patient appointments dropped by 30% in just 2 weeks as people researching me found this horror show instead of my legitimate hospital profile. "We need to hire someone to fix this," Mark insisted after I broke down crying when a patient canceled their appointment, explicitly referencing something they'd read online. We found a reputation management service that specialized in helping professionals deal with online defamation. They weren't cheap. Several $1,000s up front plus ongoing monthly fees, but I was desperate. My career was everything to me. I'd worked too hard to let Rachel destroy it with lies. Unfortunately, the reputation management company's efforts initially made things worse. Their attempts to promote positive content about me and flag the fake site for removal drew more attention to the allegations. Local community Facebook groups began discussing whether I was actually a dangerous doctor, with people chiming in to say they'd heard things, even though they'd never been my patients. I had to swallow my pride and ask colleagues to write positive testimonials about working with me, which was professionally humiliating. Most were supportive, but I could tell some wondered if there was truth to the rumors. Where there's smoke, there's fire seemed to be the unspoken assumption. The stress was affecting our relationship too. Mark and I were both exhausted and short-tempered. We'd gone from planning our dream wedding to just wanting to get it over with before Rachel could cause more damage. "Let's just move up the date and do something small," Mark suggested after another exhausting day of damage control. "Just our immediate family, somewhere Rachel won't expect." I hated the idea of letting her win by changing our plans, but practicality won out. We rescheduled for the following weekend at our original venue, telling only our closest family members the new date. We lost another deposit, but it seemed worth it for some peace of mind. The night before our new wedding date, the venue called in a panic. Health inspectors had shown up based on an anonymous tip, claiming there was a rodent infestation in the kitchen. Though they found nothing, regulations required a full inspection before the facility could serve food again. again, which couldn't happen in time for our wedding. We lost our venue and catering deposit. With less than 24 hours until our wedding, Mark's cousin Elizabeth offered her backyard as an alternative. It wasn't the dream venue we'd planned, but at that point, we just wanted to be married without further drama. Despite everything, the small backyard wedding turned out to be beautiful. Elizabeth's modest garden had a few rose bushes and a small patio, nothing like the mansion's expansive grounds, but intimate and heartfelt with just our closest family present. The smaller setting emphasized that we were surrounded only by people who truly cared about us. Just as we were exchanging vows, however, a car parked across the street began honking continuously and blasting music. Mark's brother and two friends immediately went to investigate while we rushed through our vows. Through the commotion, I could see Rachel sitting in her car, a malicious smile on her face as she disrupted our ceremony. By the time Mark's brother reached her car, she drove off, leaving us with a wedding video partially ruined by car horns. That was the final straw. The next day, we went straight to our attorney and insisted on taking stronger legal action. He had been hesitant before, saying harassment cases were difficult to prove and expensive to pursue, but now agreed we had enough documented incidents to file for a restraining order. We spent our honeymoon gathering evidence, organizing documentation of every incident over the past months, and preparing for court. It wasn't the romantic start to marriage we'd imagined, but working together against a common enemy at least reinforced our partnership. The restraining order process was more complicated than I expected. We had to show a pattern of harassment and prove that Rachel represented a credible threat. Fortunately, we had meticulously documented everything: the wedding venue fraud, the fake medical review website, the falsified text messages, the bogus malpractice claim, and statements from witnesses, including Mark's mother and my bridesmaids who had received the fake emails. Just when we thought we were making progress, Rachel filed her own restraining order against me, claiming I was the one harassing her. According to her filing, I was obsessed with her and had been stalking her for months, showing up at places she frequented and spreading lies about her to mutual acquaintances. We had to attend an extremely uncomfortable court hearing where Rachel presented her fabricated evidence, doctored photos suggesting I had been following her, manufactured text messages, and even a fake journal purportedly documenting her fear of me. She had clearly put as much effort into building this alternative narrative as she had into harassing me. Fortunately, the judge saw through her claims. Our evidence was substantial and verifiable, while Rachel's fell apart under minimal scrutiny. The judge granted my restraining order, requiring Rachel to stay at least 500 feet away from me, my home, and my workplace. He dismissed her counterpetition and warned her about the consequences of filing false claims. I left the courthouse feeling vindicated but not particularly relieved. A restraining order was just a piece of paper, and Rachel had already demonstrated her willingness to break laws to hurt me. Still, it was something: official recognition that I was the victim, not the aggressor. For about 3 weeks, things were quiet. No new fake websites appeared, no one called the hospital with false accusations, and our apartment building's security cameras showed no sign of Rachel lurking around. I started to hope she had finally gotten the message. Then Mark got a text from an unknown number. "Hey man, we should talk about Sarah. I have information you need to know. Meet me at Riverside Park, 7 p.m. tonight. Come alone." The number wasn't Rachel's, but the message followed her pattern of trying to create conflict between us. Mark showed me immediately. "It's obviously a trap," he said. "Probably this Tyler guy she used for the fake malpractice claim. Or she's using a burner phone," I suggested. "Either way, you can't go." Mark agreed, but was curious about what they were planning. What if I go, but stay in the car, just to see who shows up? I was against the idea, but Mark felt it might give us more evidence if we could prove Rachel was violating the restraining order. He promised to stay in the locked car with the windows up and drive away at the first sign of trouble. That evening, Mark parked near the meeting spot 15 minutes early. He kept his dash cam running to record whatever happened. At exactly 7 p.m., a man approached the parking area, looking around. When he spotted Mark's car, he walked directly toward it. Mark recognized him from social media as Tyler, Rachel's cousin who had filed the fraudulent malpractice claim. Tyler signaled for Mark to roll down his window, but Mark shook his head and held up his phone to show he was recording. Tyler's friendly demeanor instantly changed. He began shouting obscenities and hitting Mark's car window, clearly trying to provoke a reaction. He was recording too, likely hoping to get footage of Mark retaliating that could be used against us later. Mark calmly drove away without engaging, leaving Tyler standing in the parking lot. When he got home and showed me the dash cam footage, I felt sick. They had clearly been trying to provoke Mark into a physical confrontation they could use against us in court or to damage his reputation. We added this incident to our growing file of evidence and notified our attorney. He suggested we investigate Tyler more thoroughly, since he seemed to be acting as Rachel's proxy now that she was legally barred from contacting us directly. Joseph discovered that Tyler had a criminal record in another state for similar harassing behavior, including a conviction for criminal mischief related to an ex-girlfriend's property. This pattern suggested Rachel had found the perfect accomplice, someone who shared her vindictive tendencies and lack of boundaries. We brought this information to court, filing a motion to expand the restraining order to include Tyler as Rachel's agent. Rachel showed up to contest it, playing the victim and claiming she was being persecuted by my vendetta against her. The judge wasn't impressed with her performance but warned both parties to maintain strict distance, telling Rachel explicitly that sending others to contact me or Mark would be considered a violation of the order. For the next 2 months, things were relatively quiet. Rachel appeared to be respecting the expanded restraining order, and we started to relax our vigilance slightly. Mark and I finally took a weekend trip to a nearby lakeside cabin. Not the Japanese honeymoon we'd planned, but at least a brief escape from the stress. While we were away, my mom called in tears. Someone had thrown rocks through their front windows in the middle of the night, with notes attached saying, "Your daughter ruins lives." I drove to my parents' home immediately, devastated that Rachel had turned her attention to them. Dad tried to play it off as random vandalism, but Mom was clearly shaken. At 65, they shouldn't have to deal with this kind of stress and fear. We filed another police report and installed security cameras at their house. The local officers were more concerned than the city police had been, promising to increase patrols in the area. Still, I worried constantly about my parents now being in Rachel's crosshairs. While I was helping my parents, Rachel made her most audacious move yet. Somehow she accessed my work email account and sent inappropriate messages to several patients, including offering controlled substances without proper protocols and making unprofessional comments about their conditions. I returned from my parents' house to find myself temporarily suspended pending an IT investigation. The hospital took patient complaints extremely seriously, and the emails appeared to have genuinely come from my account. Fortunately, the IT department moved quickly. They determined the emails were sent from an IP address not associated with any hospital computer or my home network. My account had been accessed through a password reset by someone who had answers to my security questions, information Rachel would have known from our childhood. The hospital reinstated me after 3 days, with an official statement to affected patients explaining the account breach. They also implemented stronger security protocols, including 2-factor authentication for all staff emails. My department head was supportive, but I could tell the incident had raised questions about my judgment in the minds of some administrators. Worse, Rachel had apparently been planning for this outcome. Before the IT department could prove the emails were fraudulent, she had taken screenshots and sent them to the state medical board with an anonymous complaint about my professional conduct. The board was obligated to investigate any complaint involving patient communication, regardless of how it originated. I had had to hire a specialized attorney to defend my medical license, at significant expense. The process was lengthy and humiliating, requiring me to provide statements, character references, and evidence of the ongoing harassment campaign as context for the forged emails. The strain was affecting every aspect of my life. I developed insomnia and lost 15 pounds in a month from stress. My relationship with Mark was strained as we both struggled to cope with the constant anxiety. After a particularly bad night when I had a panic attack thinking I heard someone outside our apartment, Mark suggested we consider moving to another city. We could start fresh somewhere Rachel doesn't know, he suggested gently. New jobs, new home, new beginning. Part of me was tempted. The idea of escaping the constant vigilance was appealing, but another part of me was furious at the thought of being driven from the life I'd worked so hard to build. I'm not letting her win, I said firmly. This is my career, my home, my life. I'm not running away. Instead, we developed a comprehensive plan to gather conclusive evidence of Rachel's harassment. Joseph suggested creating a digital trap, a password-protected cloud storage that appeared to contain my personal journals and sensitive information, but was actually monitored to track anyone who accessed it. The journals detailed fabricated insecurities and fears that would appeal to Rachel's desire to hurt me. We made the security intentionally weak, using passwords related to information Rachel would know from our childhood. Then we had a mutual acquaintance casually mention in a public place that I'd been writing everything down in a digital journal as a way to cope with stress. The bait worked better than we expected. Within 2 days, someone accessed the fake journal using an IP address that traced back to Rachel's apartment building. Not content with just reading the entries, Rachel downloaded them and began posting excerpts on social media with cruel commentary about my pathetic life and insecurities. Joseph had built in digital watermarks and tracking pixels that conclusively tied the unauthorized access to Rachel's devices. We finally had irrefutable evidence of her computer crimes, including her digital fingerprints from the unauthorized access. Armed with this new evidence, we went back to the police. This time, we weren't just reporting harassment, we had proof of computer fraud, identity theft, and violation of the restraining order. The detective assigned to our case took it much more seriously than previous officers had. This crosses jurisdictional boundaries, he explained after reviewing our evidence. The computer crimes aspect makes prosecution more complicated, but also more likely to stick. We'll need to coordinate with Cybercrimes Division. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope that Rachel might face real consequences for her actions. The detective was candid about the challenges. Building a criminal case would take time, and the burden of proof was high, but he seemed confident that we had enough evidence to move forward. While the police investigation proceeded, our attorney suggested we should also pursue a civil case. We filed a comprehensive lawsuit against Rachel for defamation, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and financial damages resulting from her actions. Our attorney sent Rachel an official notice of the lawsuit with copies of all our evidence attached. We expected this show of force to intimidate her, but Rachel responded by creating a GoFundMe campaign, claiming she was being legally bullied by privileged doctors who were trying to silence her for speaking truth to power. Her campaign painted me as a vindictive, powerful physician, using my resources to crush a vulnerable woman who had dared to expose me. The narrative was so twisted it was almost impressive in its complete inversion of reality. Even more disturbing, people believed it. Rachel raised nearly $15,000 from strangers sympathetic to her fabricated victimhood. The lawsuit discovery process revealed that Rachel's revenge was not a spontaneous reaction to our cafe meeting. She had been planning it for years, keeping a detailed journal of ways to destroy me that dated back to when I first got into medical school. Pages of meticulous notes outlined how she would systematically attack every aspect of my life, my career, my relationship, my family, my reputation. This evidence strengthened our case significantly. Rachel's attorney, paid for with her GoFundMe money, advised her to settle the lawsuit, but Rachel angrily refused, insisting she was the real victim and would prove it in court. As the court date approached, Rachel became increasingly desperate. Tyler contacted Mark again, claiming he wanted to meet secretly to explain Rachel's side. When Mark arrived at the meeting spot, this time accompanied by our attorney who waited nearby, Tyler tried to provoke him into a physical altercation while recording on his phone. Mark calmly walked away, realizing it was another trap designed to damage our credibility before court. We added this attempted provocation to our growing mountain of evidence. 2 weeks before the court date, Rachel made her boldest move yet. She appeared at my parents' house claiming she wanted to apologize personally for any misunderstanding. My father, not recognizing her from the few photos he'd seen, let her in before my mother realized who she was. Rachel used the brief access to take photos inside my parents' modest home. She later posted these online with captions mocking their shabby furniture and pathetic lifestyle, comparing it to her parents' luxury home. This violation of the restraining order was the final piece we needed. Police issued an arrest warrant for Rachel, who had now committed a criminal offense by entering my parents' home against court orders. Rachel evaded arrest for 3 days, during which she sent a frantic email blast to my employer and colleagues claiming I had fabricated everything as part of an elaborate plot to ruin her. But her disappearance only made her look guilty. When she was finally arrested at a bus station apparently trying to leave town, few believed her protestations of innocence. With Rachel in custody awaiting a hearing on the restraining order violation, Mark and I finally felt a moment of relief. But we quickly realized this was just the beginning of a new chapter in our ordeal. The criminal case for violating the restraining order was separate from our civil lawsuit, which was still proceeding. Both would require our ongoing participation, testimony, and emotional energy. We were also concerned about the financial strain. Between legal fees, security measures, and income loss due to the damage to my professional reputation, we had already spent over $30,000 dealing with Rachel's harassment. The prospect of continuing legal battles was daunting. Unexpectedly, help came from an unexpected source. Dr. Klein, the senior partner at my hospital who had supported me throughout the ordeal, connected us with a pro bono attorney who specialized in stalking cases. The attorney had previously worked with several healthcare professionals targeted by vindictive individuals and was passionate about helping victims of this type of harassment. With improved legal representation, we felt more confident facing the upcoming proceedings. But Rachel had one more card to play. After being released on bail with strict conditions, including ankle monitoring, she convinced her parents to hire an aggressive attorney who claimed she had undiagnosed mental health issues that explained her behavior. This new defense strategy complicated what had seemed like a straightforward case. Rachel's attorney argued that she needed treatment, not punishment, and that her actions were the result of untreated conditions rather than malicious intent. The mental health evaluation ordered by the court concluded that while Rachel did have significant narcissistic personality traits, she was fully aware of her actions and their consequences. She did not qualify for an insanity defense or diminished capacity. However, her lawyer skillfully used the diagnosis to generate public sympathy, portraying Rachel as a troubled woman who needed help rather than a calculating tormentor. We countered by having my therapist testify about the severe anxiety and depression I had developed due to Rachel's harassment. The psychological damage was real and ongoing, regardless of Rachel's mental state when inflicting it. As the trial date approached, Rachel's attorney offered a settlement that included a gag order preventing me from discussing the case publicly. The terms would require Rachel to pay a modest sum for damages, undergo therapy, and maintain the restraining order, but I would be legally barred from sharing my experience with others. Mark thought we should take it. We could finally move on on, he argued. No more court dates, no more reliving the trauma. But accepting would mean Rachel's actions remained hidden from others she might target in the future. It would mean burying the truth in exchange for a quiet resolution. After careful consideration, we rejected the offer despite our attorney's caution about the unpredictability of trials. The stage was set for a final confrontation in court, where the full extent of Rachel's campaign would be exposed, and I would finally have the chance to seek justice for the havoc she had wreaked on our lives. Whatever the outcome, I was ready to face her one last time and put this nightmare behind us. The rich friend's revenge. Ending. The trial began on a rainy Monday morning. I felt sick to my stomach as I walked into the courtroom. Rachel sat at the defense table looking perfectly put together in a modest blue dress, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked nothing like the glamorous, vengeful woman who'd been terrorizing us. Instead, she looked like someone's innocent daughter who'd been wrongfully accused. I knew immediately this was a calculated image for the judge and any potential jury members. When Rachel spotted me, she gave me this sad, wounded look like I was the one who had hurt her. My blood boiled, but Mark squeezed my hand, reminding me to stay calm. Our attorney started by methodically laying out Rachel's campaign against us. She presented the evidence chronologically, starting with the charity ball incident and working through each escalating attack. The judge's expression grew increasingly disturbed as the pattern became clear. Rachel's attorney portrayed her as a misunderstood childhood friend who just wanted reconciliation. My client simply reached out to reconnect with an old friend, he argued. Dr. Thompson's hostile response triggered my client's admittedly inappropriate but understandable emotional reaction. I almost laughed out loud at this ridiculous spin. Thankfully, our attorney was prepared. She presented Rachel's journal entries planning my destruction, complete with timestamps showing they predated our coffee shop meeting by years. By the third day of trial, even Rachel's parents looked shocked by the extent of their daughter's behavior. They sat in the back row, their expressions growing more horrified with each new piece of evidence. I almost felt sorry for them, realizing they probably hadn't known the full scope of what their daughter had done. The turning point came during Rachel's cross-examination. She maintained her wounded victim act remarkably well for the first hour, speaking softly about how she'd always admired me and just wanted to be part of my life again. But our attorney slowly chipped away at her story, highlighting contradictions and presenting evidence that directly countered her claims. When cornered about the wedding venue sabotage, Rachel finally cracked. "You deserved everything I did to you," she screamed, her face contorted with rage. "You've always looked down on me, always thought you were better than me just because you got some scholarship." The courtroom went silent. Rachel seemed to realize her mistake immediately and tried to backpedal, but it was too late. Her outburst confirmed her malicious intent, destroying her attorney's carefully constructed narrative of mental health issues and misunderstandings. The judge not only ruled in our favor but issued a permanent restraining order and ordered Rachel to pay significant damages, $175,000 for defamation, emotional distress, and financial losses we'd suffered. He also recommended the prosecutor pursue criminal charges for identity theft, computer fraud, and violation of the temporary restraining order. As we left the courthouse, I felt overwhelming relief. The judge's decision brought immediate validation, official recognition that I wasn't crazy or paranoid. Rachel really had been methodically trying to destroy my life. I expected to feel elated, but mostly I just felt exhausted. The constant vigilance and anxiety of the past year had drained me completely. That night, Mark and I ordered takeout and fell asleep on the couch before 9 p.m., too tired to even properly celebrate our victory. The aftermath brought new challenges we hadn't anticipated. Rachel's parents refused to help pay the damages, telling her lawyer they were done enabling her. After years of bailing Rachel out of her messes, they'd finally reached their limit. This meant Rachel faced both financial consequences and the loss of her safety net. I felt vindicated by the ruling, but still struggled with anxiety and trust issues. Jumping at unexpected noises, checking the locks 3 times before bed, scanning every room for threats when I entered. These had become automatic behaviors I couldn't shake. Mark noticed and suggested using part of the settlement money for therapy. "Not just for you," he said, "for both of us. This affected me too, and I think couples therapy would help us process everything together." He was right. We found a therapist who specialized in trauma and recovery. The sessions were sometimes painful but helped us begin healing together, strengthening our relationship through the shared trauma. 2 months after the trial, I received good news professionally. The hospital fully cleared my record and offered me a position on a prestigious research team studying innovative treatments for pediatric autoimmune disorders. It was exactly the kind of work I'd always wanted to do. The position required frequent travel to medical conferences, which triggered my new security concerns. The idea of being away from home, staying in hotels where anyone could find me, sent my anxiety spiraling. Mark helped me develop safety protocols that made me feel secure, checking in at specific times, using hotels with good security, always keeping my location shared with him. It wasn't perfect, but it allowed me to accept the position. My parents decided to move closer to us. The rock-throwing incident had shaken them more than they initially admitted, and they wanted peace of mind. The house they wanted was slightly beyond their budget, so we used some of the settlement money to help with the down payment. It felt right to turn Rachel's attack into something positive for our family. As we settled into our new normal, I received an unexpected letter from Rachel's younger sister, Emily. I'd only met her a few times as a kid, but she wrote to apologize for her sister's actions. "I've watched Rachel's jealousy of you consume her for years," she wrote. "She kept newspaper clippings when you got your scholarship, and later your medical school acceptance. She was intensely fixated on your accomplishments." The letter was kind, but also contained a warning that Rachel had been telling people in jail she would get revenge once the restraining order expired. We documented this threat and worked with our attorney to extend the restraining order for an additional 3 years. With legal protections in place, I focused on rebuilding my reputation at work. Some colleagues still treated me cautiously, afraid of being drawn into drama. I couldn't really blame them. Rachel had created such chaos that people naturally wanted to keep their distance. I volunteered for community health initiatives to demonstrate my commitment to the hospital's mission beyond personal issues. I organized a free clinic for underserved neighborhoods and joined the hospital's mentorship program for medical students. Gradually, the wariness faded as colleagues saw my dedication. During one volunteer clinic, I treated a patient who mentioned working at Nordstrom's management. As we chatted, I realized she had been Rachel's former boss. She casually mentioned firing someone with serious boundary issues, who had targeted another employee over a perceived slight. She just couldn't let it go, the woman said, not knowing my connection to Rachel. Kept escalating until we had no choice but to terminate her. Discussing this felt like participating in the same toxic behavior I'd condemned. I politely changed the subject and focused on the patient's medical needs. I didn't need more Rachel stories. I had enough of my own. Mark and I finally took our delayed honeymoon to coastal Maine. Not the Japan trip we'd originally planned, but a peaceful week in a seaside cottage. We completely disconnected from social media and work, trying to just be a normal couple enjoying their honeymoon. 3 days in, I found myself constantly checking windows and feeling watched whenever we walked on the beach. Mark noticed and gently suggested we see a trauma therapist specifically for my hypervigilance when we returned home. The specialized therapy helped immensely with my anxiety. My therapist explained that my brain had been rewired by trauma to constantly expect threats. Through EMDR therapy and cognitive techniques, I slowly began to feel safe again. I still struggled with allowing new people into our lives. Every new acquaintance raised questions in my mind. What if they're connected to Rachel? What if they're just pretending to be friendly? Mark and I started small by hosting dinner parties parties with trusted friends, gradually expanding our social circle with their vetted connections. A year after the trial, I was offered a speaking opportunity at a medical conference on workplace harassment. The organizers had heard about my experience and thought my perspective would be valuable. Accepting meant my story would become more public, potentially exposing me to more attention. After careful consideration, I decided to share my experience anonymously through a colleague. She presented my case study without using my name, helping others without re-exposing myself to potential backlash. We learned through mutual connections that Rachel had moved to another state after serving a short jail sentence for violating the restraining order. She'd apparently started over with a new job and new social circle. Part of me hoped she had genuinely changed and wasn't just regrouping to target someone else. Another part remained skeptical. Joseph helped us create secure social media profiles and monitored for any concerning online activity. We maintained our vigilance, but less frantically than before. Life was gradually returning to normal. For my 30th birthday, Mark surprised me with news that we were expecting our first child. I was overwhelmed with joy, a happiness I hadn't thought possible during the darkest days of Rachel's harassment. But this joy came with new fears about protecting our growing family. We channeled these concerns productively by creating extensive security systems and legal protections for our child. We established a trust to keep our home address private, installed comprehensive security systems, and made sure our child's information would be protected at future schools and daycares. 2 years after the ordeal began, we received unexpected news through our attorney. Rachel had completed court-ordered therapy and sent a notarized letter acknowledging her actions without asking for forgiveness. Her therapist reported significant progress in addressing her underlying issues, and she had maintained steady employment and housing without incident for over a year. The letter wasn't exactly an apology. She still framed much of it around her feelings rather than the harm she caused, but it showed at least some growth in her understanding of boundaries and consequences. Accepting this potential growth meant facing my own lingering bitterness. Part of me wanted Rachel to suffer forever for what she'd done to us. Reading about her progress stirred up complicated emotions, relief that she might not target anyone else, resentment that she got to move on after causing so much damage. I chose neither to respond nor to resist her redemption. If she was genuinely changing, that was ultimately good for everyone, but I didn't owe her forgiveness or acknowledgement. Instead, I focused on the beautiful life I'd built despite her attempts to destroy it. By our third wedding anniversary, life had found a new rhythm. I was thriving in my research position and had published 2 well-received papers. Mark's engineering firm had promoted him to project lead. Our daughter Lily was a happy, active toddler who filled our home with laughter. My parents had settled into their new home nearby and were doting grandparents. The hypervigilance faded gradually. I still had moments of panic when something triggered memories of that time, but they became less frequent and less intense. Mark and I developed a shorthand for when either of us was struggling, simple code words that communicated, "I need support," without having to explain. We kept the restraining order active through regular renewals, but stopped actively monitoring Rachel's movements. The energy we once spent on protection was redirected to building the life we wanted. Sometimes at night, watching Mark read to Lily, or looking around our home filled with friends for dinner parties, I marveled at how close we came to losing everything. Rachel had targeted every part of my life with surgical precision: my career, my relationship, my family, my sense of safety, but she failed. Despite her meticulous planning and relentless attacks, we survived. Not just survived, but thrived. The ultimate victory wasn't in Rachel's punishment, but in our happiness, the very thing she had tried so desperately to destroy. I still don't understand what drives someone to dedicate years to destroying another person's life. The level of hatred and fixation Rachel showed goes beyond normal human emotion, but I've stopped trying to make sense of it. Some mysteries don't have satisfying answers, and continuing to search for them only keeps you trapped in the past. Instead, I focus on gratitude for what I have: a loving husband who stood beside me through the worst experience of my life, a beautiful daughter who represents all our hopes for the future, parents who support us unconditionally, a career that fulfills me, and the knowledge that I'm stronger than I ever knew. Rachel remains trapped in her past until she truly changes. I've moved forward, and that's the best revenge of all.